The Boston Logan International Airport hummed with early morning activity. Jade Montgomery stepped into the first-class lounge, her tailored navy suit perfectly pressed, soft curls framing a face exuding quiet confidence. At just 22, Jade had closed a major investment deal the day before, the culmination of months of hard work and determination. Yet, as she settled into a seat near the windows, she felt the weight of glances, not admiring, but appraising. How did she get here? Does she belong? Jade placed her carry-on by her side and gazed out at the runway. She had learned to mask her discomfort, but moments like these were a reminder of the battles she fought just by being seen. Her mother's voice echoed in her mind. "Jade, you're going to face barriers. Your strength lies in how you respond. Let no one make you feel small." Alexandra, a trailblazing CEO, had broken barriers Jade couldn't even imagine. She had raised Jade with the same grit and grace that had propelled her to success. Still, it didn't make the stairs any easier. "Can I help you?" Jade turned to see a flight attendant, Victoria Sinclair. Victoria's expression was polite but distant, her eyes scanning Jade in a way that felt more like assessment than assistance. "No, thank you," Jade replied, offering a polite smile. Victoria lingered, her gaze flicking from Jade's face to the boarding pass on the table. Her lips tightened. "Are you sure you're in the right section?" she asked, her tone teetering between professionalism and suspicion. Jade's smile faltered, but she recovered quickly. Without a word, she picked up her boarding pass and held it out. Victoria leaned in, her expression betraying no apology as she straightened. "Very well," Victoria said curtly before walking away. Jade placed the boarding pass back on the table and exhaled quietly. Moments like these always left a bitter taste. She glanced around, catching the faintest hint of curiosity in the eyes of other passengers. At the counter, Victoria leaned against the polished surface, her eyes drifting back toward Jade. Something about the young woman unsettled her. Victoria prided herself on maintaining the standard of first-class passengers, and Jade, with her youthful confidence, felt out of place. "Are you coming?" The question came from Rosa Mendez, a younger flight attendant with a warm smile. Rosa stood nearby, holding a clipboard. Victoria straightened, glancing at Jade one last time before following Rosa toward the crew briefing area. Jade adjusted her watch and leaned back, her gaze returning to the window. A plane roared to life. She told herself to shake off the encounter, to focus on her recent deal and her future. But a small voice whispered that this was only the beginning. She had felt it before, this subtle tension, a quiet storm brewing. Something about this flight felt different. The low hum of the engines filled the first-class cabin. Jade adjusted her seat, gazing out at the clouds below. The view should have been calming, but she couldn't shake the tension. Her instincts weren't wrong. Victoria Sinclair stood near the galley, her gaze darting toward Jade. Something about the young woman unsettled her. Perhaps it was Jade's quiet confidence. Whatever it was, it ignited a discomfort she masked with professionalism. Jade had grown adept at sensing these undercurrents. She recognized the weight of stares and the clipped tones reserved for people like her. It was a familiar script. Her thoughts drifted to a memory from 2 years earlier. She had been an intern at a company gala when a senior executive mistook her for catering staff. The sting lingered. Her mother's words echoed, "Your strength lies in how you respond. Never let anyone steal your composure." Alexandra had built her career on that principle. Jade carried that same resolve, though it didn't make these moments any less exhausting. She turned her attention back to the cabin as Rosa approached with the drinks cart. "Would you like something to drink, Miss Montgomery?" Rosa asked kindly. "Just water, thank you," Jade replied. Rosa poured the water. Victoria hovered nearby, watching. Thomas Bradford, seated across the aisle, signaled for Victoria. "Champagne, please," he said, his voice tinged with entitlement. Victoria poured his drink with exaggerated graciousness. When she reached Jade's row, Victoria skipped over her entirely, moving on to serve the couple behind her. Jade noticed immediately, her grip tightening on her glass of water. The slight was subtle, but its intentionality was unmistakable. Across the aisle, Thomas chuckled softly. Jade caught his gaze, her expression unflinching. She refused to give him the reaction he seemed to expect. Rosa, returning from the back, hesitated as she passed Jade's seat. Rosa's face betrayed a flicker of unease, a silent acknowledgement of the slight. "Miss Montgomery, if there's anything else you need, please let me know," she said softly, her tone carrying an unspoken apology. "Thank you," Jade replied, her voice calm but firm. She appreciated Rosa's effort, but it wasn't enough to erase the tension. Other passengers had begun to take notice. A woman 2 rows back discreetly raised her phone, angling it to record. An older man across the aisle frowned, his disapproval evident. Victoria, oblivious or indifferent, continued her rounds with calculated efficiency. To her, the slight was insignificant, but for Jade, it was another addition to the list of unspoken battles. As the minutes dragged on, the cabin grew quieter. Jade sat still, her mind racing. She thought of her mother's advice. "Choose your battles wisely, Jade. Some fights are worth the risk." This felt like one of those fights. She took another sip of water, her gaze steady as she watched Victoria retreat. A storm brewed inside her, quiet but powerful. She could feel that this flight was about to shift in ways no one expected. The steady hum of the engines filled the cabin. Jade shifted, attempting to find calm. She gazed out the window, but her mind refused to quiet. She could feel the scrutiny. Victoria lingered at the front, her eyes flicking toward Jade. There was something about Jade's presence that bothered her. Jade didn't just occupy a seat. She exuded a quiet confidence that Victoria found unsettling. Jade had seen this before, the deliberate scrutiny, the tight-lipped glances. It was a language she'd learned to interpret, and it was exhausting. Her mother's words surfaced again. "Your strength lies in your composure. Never let them see you falter." Victoria approached, her clipboard held like a shield. "Miss Montgomery, I need to verify your boarding pass again," she said, her voice crisp. Jade looked up, surprised. "I already showed it when I boarded," she replied. "Yes," Victoria said, "but it's standard procedure." Passengers nearby stirred. Jade inhaled slowly, retrieved her boarding pass, and handed it over. Victoria studied the pass for an unnecessarily long time, then handed it back with a tight smile. "Thank you for your cooperation," she said, turning away. Jade slipped the pass back into her bag. Her composure remained, but her chest tightened. Minutes later, Victoria returned, her demeanor more rigid. "Miss Montgomery," she said, her voice final, "I'm afraid I'll need you to move to another seat." Jade blinked. "Excuse me," she said, her tone sharper. "This section is reserved for passengers with valid first-class tickets," Victoria continued, her words loud enough for others to hear. Murmurs rippled through the cabin. Passengers exchanged glances, some with raised eyebrows, others with frowns. Jade sat up straighter, her calm exterior cracking slightly. "I have a valid first-class ticket," she said firmly. Victoria's posture stiffened. "If that's the case, I'll need to confirm it with the flight manifest. Until then, I must insist you cooperate by moving to economy." A woman 2 rows back discreetly raised her phone. An older man cleared his throat loudly. "I'm not moving," Jade said, each word deliberate. "You've already verified my ticket. I belong here." Her words hung in the air. Rosa froze, her expression a mix of discomfort and frustration. Victoria's face flushed. "I'll have to speak to the captain if you refuse to cooperate." Jade leaned back, crossing her legs. "Please do," she replied coldly. Victoria hesitated before turning sharply and heading toward the cockpit. The murmurs grew louder. "Unbelievable," the older man muttered. Rosa approached Jade. "Miss Montgomery, if there's anything else you need, please don't hesitate to ask," she said softly. "Thank you," Jade replied, her words carrying more weight than the simple phrase suggested. She returned her attention to the window. The cabin buzzed with whispers. Jade sat motionless, her composure a fragile mask. Victoria moved with purpose, her eyes scanning the passengers. When her gaze landed on Jade, it lingered. Jade noticed but didn't react. Her grip on the armrest betrayed her calm exterior. Victoria approached. "Ms. Montgomery," she began, her tone clipped, "I need to verify your boarding pass again." Jade blinked. She had already presented her boarding pass. "I've already shown it to you," she said evenly. "Yes," Victoria said, "but there's been an issue with the manifest." The murmurs grew louder. Jade sighed softly, retrieved her boarding pass, and handed it over. Victoria scanned the document. "Thank you for your cooperation," she said curtly. Jade returned the boarding pass to her bag. Moments later, Victoria returned, her movements sharper. "Ms. Montgomery," she said, her voice colder, "I'm afraid I'll have to ask you to move to a different seat. This section is reserved for passengers with valid first-class tickets." Jade froze, her heart pounding. The audacity of the statement hit her. She inhaled deeply, steadying herself. "I have a valid first-class ticket," she said firmly. Victoria's posture stiffened. "If that's the case, I'll need to confirm it with the captain. Until then, I'll ask for your cooperation in moving to an economy seat." The whispers grew louder. Across the aisle, an older man shook his head. A woman 2 rows back discreetly raised her phone. "I'm not moving," Jade said, her voice sharp. "You've already verified my ticket, and it clearly states that I belong here." Her firmness caused a flicker of uncertainty in Victoria's face. "If you refuse to cooperate, I'll have to involve the captain," Victoria said, her voice louder. "Please do," Jade replied coldly. Victoria turned and walked briskly toward the cockpit. The murmurs swelled. Jade unbuckled her seatbelt and rose. She ignored the glances and made her way toward the bathroom. Inside, Jade leaned against the door, her chest heaving. Her reflection stared back, the cracks in her composure visible. Her calm facade slipped. She splashed cold water on her face. Her mother's words echoed, "Never let them see you falter, Jade. Your strength lies in your composure." Straightening, she reached for her phone and dialed her mother's number. "Mom," she said quietly. "Jade, what's wrong?" Alexandra's voice was calm but alert. Jade recounted the situation. "I see," Alexandra said finally, her tone cool. "Stay calm, Jade. I'll handle this." Jade let out a breath. "Thanks, Mom." "You're stronger than this," Alexandra said. "Don't let them rattle you. I'll make some calls immediately. This will be resolved." When the call ended, Jade felt renewed resolve. She returned to her seat, her shoulders squared. The murmurs quieted. Victoria, back at the front, glanced at Jade, her expression flickering with unease. Jade didn't look away. As Victoria shifted uncomfortably, Jade felt the power dynamic change. The hum of the engines was now a background murmur. Jade sat upright, her hands on her lap. Around her, the murmur of passengers was a low static. Victoria stood at the front, her face flushed. Phones were out, cameras angled. The intercom crackled. "Ladies and gentlemen," Captain Chen's voice broke through, "due to unforeseen circumstances, we will be making an unscheduled landing at the nearest airport. Please remain seated and follow crew instructions. Thank you for your patience." Gasps and murmurs rippled through the cabin. Jade's stomach twisted. An emergency landing? Jade could feel the weight of dozens of eyes on her, their curiosity and judgment pressing down. Victoria turned sharply and disappeared into the cockpit. Rosa appeared at Jade's side. "Ms. Montgomery," she said softly, "I'm so sorry. I promise you, not all of us feel this way." "Thank you," Jade said, her voice calm. Nearby passengers began speaking more openly. "This is ridiculous," an older woman muttered. "Typical power trip," a younger man said. Jade caught snippets of the conversations, indignation and quiet support. The tide was turning. The engines shifted to a lower hum. Outside, the clouds gave way to city streets. The plane touched down. Jade's heart pounded as she spotted movement outside. Uniformed personnel, airline representatives, security officials, and, surprisingly, members of the press. Her phone buzzed. A message from her mother. "I'm here. Stay strong." A flicker of relief broke through the tension. The cabin door opened. Passengers began to rise. Thomas Bradford stood, self-assured, as he made his way down the aisle. Victoria followed, her clipboard clutched like a lifeline. Rosa lingered by Jade's row. "Whatever happens next," she said quietly, "just know you're not alone in this." Jade nodded, her grip on her phone tightening. She rose to her feet. Stepping into the light, Jade was met with a wall of scrutiny. At the edge of the commotion stood Alexandra Montgomery. The air shifted as their eyes met. Jade quickened her steps. Alexandra moved forward. The game had changed. As Alexandra placed a hand on Jade's shoulder, her gaze swept over the scene. Justice was here. The runway was bathed in floodlights. Jade stepped off the plane, her head held high. Behind her, the murmurs of passengers, the buzz of cameras, the distant hum of activity. At the foot of the stairs, Alexandra stood with her team. She exuded a quiet power. Her gaze locked on Jade. Jade approached, the tension easing slightly. Without a word, Alexandra placed a hand on Jade's arm. Victoria followed closely, her clipboard clutched like a shield. Her earlier confidence had evaporated. "Ladies and gentlemen," Alex began, her voice clear and firm, "I am Alexandra Montgomery, CEO of this airline. I have been informed of a deeply troubling incident that occurred during this flight. Let me be clear. Discrimination of any kind will not be tolerated in my company." Whispers spread through the crowd. Passengers stepped forward. "I saw everything," an older woman said. "That flight attendant was out of line." A younger man added, "I've got it all on video." "And you," Alex said to Thomas, "as a senior representative of this airline, you had a responsibility. Instead, you stood by." Thomas stammered. I had no idea it had gone this far." "This is enough," Alex interrupted. "Your complicity speaks volumes. There will be consequences." Jade stood silently beside her mother. Rosa stepped forward. "I saw what happened," she said. "Victoria's behavior was unacceptable. She treated Ms. Montgomery unfairly from the moment she boarded." Victoria muttered, "I was just following protocol." "Protocol does not justify discrimination," Alex said coldly. "Your actions reflect on this company, and I will not stand for it." The silence was heavy. "Today," Alex said to the crowd, "is about more than one incident. It's about the change we must demand together. Stories like this remind us why we must stand up, speak out, and act against injustice." She paused. "If this story has resonated with you, if you believe in standing for justice and equality, don't just watch. Be part of the change. Subscribe to our channel to stay informed, to share these stories, and to amplify the voices that need to be heard. Together, we can make a difference." Jade glanced at her mother, a flicker of pride crossing her face. "This isn't over," Alex said quietly to Jade, "but we're going to make it right." Jade nodded. Together they turned to face the crowd. The airport's VIP lounge was quiet. Alexandra stood at the center, her gaze moving between the faces. Victoria sat in a corner, visibly uncomfortable. Thomas hovered nearby. Jade sat beside her mother, her face calm. Alexandra placed a hand on Jade's shoulder. The gathered passengers stood. "Before we begin," Alexandra said, her voice sharp and steady, "I want to thank each of you who stepped forward. Your courage to speak out matters. Injustice thrives in silence, and today you have refused to let it." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Turning to Victoria and Thomas, Alexandra's tone hardened. "Miss Sinclair, do you have anything to say for yourself?" Victoria flinched, her eyes darting to Thomas. "I was following protocol," she said defensively. "I didn't mean to offend anyone." "Enough," Alexandra interrupted. "Your actions were not about protocol. They were about bias. Your bias. And your behavior reflects not only on yourself, but on this entire company." "You didn't realize?" Alexandra snapped. "That is the problem. You didn't think. You acted out of prejudice, and now you must face the consequences. A woman from the group stepped forward. We all saw what happened, she said. This wasn't a misunderstanding. She treated Jade differently from the moment she boarded the plane. Another passenger chimed in, and when people started recording, she doubled down instead of backing off. It was appalling. Rosa stepped forward, her hands trembling. Victoria ignored Jade during service, questioned her ticket without cause, and publicly humiliated her. That's not protocol, that's discrimination. Victoria sank into her chair. Alexandra turned to Thomas. And you, Mr. Bradford, as a senior representative, you had every opportunity to step in. Instead, you chose to remain silent. Why? Thomas stammered. I didn't realize the situation had escalated. I was focused on protecting myself. Protecting yourself? Alexandra finished coldly. Well, that ends now. Both of you will be held accountable. Turning to Jade, Alexandra's voice softened. Jade, you have shown incredible strength. Your composure is a testament to your character, but you shouldn't have had to endure this in the first place. Jade nodded. Alexandra addressed the passengers. This incident highlights the work we still have to do. Discrimination is unacceptable, and it will not be tolerated under my leadership. Effective immediately, I will implement mandatory diversity training for all employees. Additionally, new oversight measures will be established. The crowd murmured its approval. Turning to the press cameras, Alexandra's voice carried urgency. This is about more than one incident. It's about standing together, demanding better, and refusing to stay silent. If you believe in justice, in equality, in the power of collective action, join us. Share this story, amplify these voices. And if you want to stay part of this journey, subscribe to our channel. Together, we can build a future where stories like this are the exception, not the norm. Jade glanced at her mother, a flicker of pride crossing her face. Victoria, visibly shaken, muttered, I'm sorry. Your apology will mean more when it's backed by action, Alexandra replied firmly. As the crowd dispersed, Alexandra turned to Jade. This is just the beginning, she said quietly. We've made our stand, but the work isn't done, and I'll be with you every step of the way. Jade nodded, a determined smile breaking through. Together they walked toward the waiting press. A week had passed. The incident's impact rippled far beyond the first-class cabin. What began as a moment of injustice had ignited a global conversation. Social media buzzed with hashtags like Justice for Jade and Equality in the airline, rallying people around the cause. Jade Montgomery sat at her kitchen table, the morning light streaming in. Her phone buzzed incessantly. She sipped her coffee, her thoughts flickering between gratitude and exhaustion. Across the table, Alexandra watched her. You've done remarkably well, she said. It doesn't feel like it, Jade admitted. It feels overwhelming. Alexandra's expression softened. You didn't ask for it, but you're here now, and what you're doing matters. People are listening because you showed strength. Jade nodded. It's just hard to know where to start. You start by being true to yourself, Alexandra said, and by remembering that you don't have to do this alone. The media frenzy had been relentless. Jade scrolled through her phone, pausing at a video of a passenger recounting the moment Victoria demanded her ticket. Her heart tightened. Her phone buzzed again, a reminder about her upcoming interview. A knot formed in her stomach. That afternoon, Jade sat in a bright studio. Jade, the journalist said, this story has struck a chord. You've become a symbol of resilience. What do you want people to take away from this? This isn't just about me, Jade began, her voice steady. It's about the countless moments like this that go unseen. It's about the people who endure them every day. I was lucky. I had my mom, but so many don't. And that's why it's important to speak up, to support each other, and to demand better. She turned to the camera. If you've ever felt like you didn't belong, know that you do. And if you've ever seen someone being treated unfairly, don't stay silent. Be the voice they need. Together we can create a world where no one has to question their worth. Your mother has been a central figure in this story. What role has she played? Jade smiled. She's always been my anchor. Watching her lead with strength and compassion has taught me so much. This isn't just about fixing what went wrong. It's about building something better, and she's the reason I believe that's possible. That evening, the interview aired, sparking a wave of responses. The hashtags Justice for Jade and Equality in the airline grew even larger. Alexandra's reforms began to ripple through the corporate world. Competitor airlines announced similar initiatives. News outlets reported on passenger testimonies and the industry-wide shift toward greater accountability. As Jade sat in her living room scrolling through the reactions, her phone buzzed. It was Rosa. "Thank you for being brave, Jade. Because of you, I found my voice too." A small smile broke across Jade's face. The weight on her chest felt lighter. The world beyond her window seemed full of possibility. Victoria Sinclair sat at a small desk in her apartment. The past 3 months had been a whirlwind. Her termination had been swift. The diversity training sessions were no longer a formality. She glanced at her phone, a reminder of today's training. The facilitator was Rosa. Victoria swallowed hard. The training room buzzed. Victoria entered cautiously, choosing a seat near the back. At the front, Rosa stood. Her eyes scanned the crowd, pausing on Victoria. "Good afternoon, everyone," Rosa began. "Today's session is about unconscious bias." As Rosa spoke, Victoria felt a pang of guilt. Her actions had been deliberate. The session unfolded with personal stories. Toward the end, Rosa opened the floor. Victoria hesitated, then raised her hand. "When I started attending these sessions," she began, her voice faltering, "I told myself I didn't belong here. I thought I was above this. But I've realized I was wrong. I caused harm because I was unwilling to see past my own biases. I know an apology can't undo the damage, but I'm committed to doing better." The room fell silent. "Acknowledgement is a step," Rosa said, "but what matters most is what you choose to do next." That evening, Victoria opened her notebook and began to write. "Dear Jade and Alexandra, I want to express my deepest regret for my actions on that flight. What I did was inexcusable, and I am truly sorry for the pain I caused. These past months have been a journey of unlearning and reflection, and I am beginning to understand the depth of my own privilege and the harm it allowed me to perpetuate. I am not the same person I was then, and I am committed to continuing this work. Thank you for holding me accountable. Your courage has been a catalyst for change, and I hope that someday I can be part of the solution instead of the problem." With humility and sincerity, Victoria Sinclair, she sealed the letter. Days later, Jade sat in her apartment, the letter resting on the coffee table. "Have you read it?" Alexandra asked gently. "Not yet," Jade replied. Alexandra leaned forward. "Forgiveness isn't about letting someone off the hook. It's about freeing you." "I need time," she said finally. "Take all the time you need," Alexandra replied. Jade picked up the envelope, studying it. She placed it in a drawer. As she closed the drawer, she looked out at the city skyline. The world was moving forward. The sun rose over New York City. For Jade, it marked a milestone, a year since the flight that changed her life. She stood at the entrance of the conference hall. Inside, hundreds of attendees buzzed with energy. The room quieted as Alexandra stepped onto the stage. "1 year ago," she began, "our airline faced a moment of reckoning. What began as an incident of discrimination exposed deeper issues not just within our company, but across the industry. Today we gather to celebrate progress and to reaffirm our commitment to equality, accountability, and lasting change. This journey has been far from easy. It requires courage, persistence, and a willingness to confront uncomfortable truths. And it requires voices, like the one I am honored to introduce now, someone who has turned pain into purpose, a moment into a movement. Ladies and gentlemen, my daughter, Jade Montgomery." The audience erupted in applause. "Thank you, Mom," Jade began, her voice steady. "A year ago I boarded a flight expecting nothing more than a quiet journey home. Instead, I found myself in a situation that forced me to confront an all-too-common reality, the feeling of being unseen, unheard, and undervalued." Her voice softened. "What happened on that flight was painful, humiliating, and deeply personal. But it also became something bigger than me. It became a catalyst for change, thanks to the courage of passengers, the support of strangers, and the leadership of a mother who has always taught me to stand tall, even when the world tries to knock you down." The room was silent. This past year has been a journey. We've seen what's possible when people come together, when voices unite. And we've learned that change doesn't happen overnight. It's a process, a series of choices, to listen, to learn, and to act. Her voice grew firmer. "To those who have experienced discrimination, know this. You are not alone. Your voice matters, and your story has the power to inspire change. And to those in positions of power, I urge you to use it wisely. Create spaces where everyone feels valued, where equality isn't just an aspiration, but a reality." The applause was thunderous. Later, Jade wandered through the hall. Rosa approached her. "You were incredible up there," she said. "Thank you," Jade replied, "and thank you for everything you've done this past year. Your courage that day made all the difference." Rosa grew thoughtful. "I think we all learned something that day." Their conversation was interrupted by an older woman. "Miss Montgomery," she said, her voice trembling, "your words." "Thank you," the woman said, her voice trembling. "What you've done has given people like me hope. My daughter saw your story and decided to speak up at her job. You've changed more lives than you'll ever know." Jade's throat tightened. She clasped the woman's hands, her own eyes glistening. "Thank you for sharing that," she said. "It means more than I can say." As the evening wound down, Jade stepped outside onto a balcony. The city lights sparkled below. Alexandra joined her. "Lost in thought?" she asked. Jade smiled. "Just thinking about how far we've come and how far we still have to go." Alexandra placed an arm around her shoulders. "It's overwhelming at times, but it's worth it. Change doesn't happen in a single moment. It's a series of moments like this one that move us closer." Jade nodded. "We're stronger together," she said. "Always," Alexandra replied. A few weeks later, Jade boarded another flight. As she settled into her seat, a flight attendant approached. "Miss Montgomery," the attendant said with a warm smile, "it's an honor to have you on board." "Thank you," Jade smiled back. "It's good to be here." As the plane ascended, she glanced out the window. The horizon stretched endlessly before her. The journey wasn't over, but she felt certain they were on the right path. As Jade stepped away from the balcony, the city lights shimmered below. With her mother's support and her own determination, she had turned a painful moment into a powerful movement. Her journey was only beginning, a story that would inspire countless others. If you were in Jade's shoes, how would you respond when confronted with discrimination? We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like and share this story. Subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories that remind us of the power of hope and collective action. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time. Disclaimer: all stories shared on this channel are entirely fictional and created for entertainment purposes. We advocate for a world where everyone has equal rights under the law and where society continues to grow in fairness, development, and civilization. Our goal is to share heartwarming stories that contribute to making life better. Any resemblance to real events, individuals, or organizations is purely coincidental and unintentional. These stories are not meant to reference any actual people, events, or entities and contain no political or religious connotations.